Welcome everybody who is watching. Welcome to our webinar, Mastering Local SEO to Build Neighborhood Nurturing. We have a great guest. We have great reports and research to show you. So why don't we kick it off? Obviously, my name is Christian Ariola. I'm going to be your host today. I am on the product enablement side of Overall. And our guest is Claudia Tamina, Chief Executive Officer over at Reputation Arm and a Google product expert. So welcome to the webinar, Claudia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to geek out with you about Google Business Profiles today.
And I like that because I know that we can geek out, right? We recently did a podcast together. So this is going to be our more in depth, right? We're going to go harder into that research that you did, your findings and things of that nature. And just to give everybody some context, right, is what exactly is neighborhood nurturing? I mean, it's really helping your brand, drive that perception home. I mean, whether you're multi-locations, franchise, or just a local mom and pop, that perception is incredibly important. Is going to help you create those local connections, which in my case or in a lot of customers, they want that, right? Even if it's a franchise or a multi-location, there has to be some level of connection to drive that loyalty home. And at the same time as that visibility is so important when it comes to local SEO, which is really what we're talking about, right? So today's focus, our agenda is we're going to talk about how to leverage Google Business Profile. Tons of insights, tons of recommendations. And then I think when it gets very interesting is once we get into the effective review and photo strategies, because those are going to be practical tips from Claudia from her findings. And then we get into real gold nuggets, practical tips, right? So tons of things happening there. And then sharing a success story with you guys as well. I think you're going to enjoy that. With that, Claudia, why don't we take it away and talk about how do we leverage Google Business Profiles, specifically the impact of menu item names and highlights, because I know you have a lot of research, done a lot of research on this. So take it away. Tell us a little bit more of what you found so far.
Yeah, so I do a ton of research on Google Business Profiles. I study a lot of different search queries, and the idea is, to take my data and figure out why Google ranked me for this specific search query, why I can't rank for another search query. And so I do a lot of tests, a lot of A/B testing. I'm changing a lot of things on Google Business Profiles to see what's going to trigger a ranking boost. And I have loads of information I could share with you guys. So first here, one of the most important things that I've realized is naming your menu item is really important to rank for specific food items. So you can have tons of review mentions with the keywords and you won't rank. You can even have images, but until you actually add that third layer of the menu item, Google is not going to recognize that you have that food item in stock unless it's on your menu. So naming it correctly is super important. And I stumbled on this because I had a client that does tableside Caesar salads, and I noticed that they had so many reviews regarding Caesar salad. And so I just, for fun, wanted to test how they ranked for that specific keyword. And I was surprised to see that they didn't rank. Despite having 39 review mentions, despite having lots of photos, I knew there was something that was missing. And when I looked at their menu items, they didn't have it labeled as Caesar salad. And as soon as we labeled it Caesar salad, then immediately ranking started.
It's fantastic. Like, you would think it's obvious, right? But at the same time, it's not, right? So it's a great nugget there.
Yeah, and like we tend to think like, oh, keywords and reviews really matter. And they do. They do matter because they help with other areas and let Google recognize. But it's definitely a bunch of signals that Google's looking for, and they're not just relying on one. So it's important to keep that in mind. So I'm going to just jump into the next slide. Popular dishes is another area on Google Business Profiles. So we have your menu items, but then you'll notice when you click on the tab for menu, there's going to be a section that's, your menu highlights. And so a lot of times the menu highlights are a ranking factor. So it's another keyword that you can rank for. So I often track menu item names on my ranking reports, and then I'll also track the menu highlight because Google is naming those. And so unless you're actively monitoring it and changing the name or attempting to change the name, because Google doesn't always accept the change, you're going to notice that you're going to rank for those specific words in that area too. And then this specific slide just shows when a review was mentioned with that specific keyword, there was a boost in ranking. So again, reviews do matter, but you also have to have the other layers in place or you won't see a boost in ranking for that specific search query.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. It's always been a theory, right? So that, like I said at the beginning, it's always great when you can back it up with examples and data. Now talking about those menu items and trying to connect those to search queries, right? What have you noticed on that, on those factors?
So search queries Google's looking like at the exact search queries. So I actually, I have a ranking report where I'm measuring a slider and then sliders with an S, and then Wagyu slider and Kobe slider. So the menu item was labeled Kobe slider. The menu highlight was labeled Wagyu slider. And then I just wanted to see how they ranked in general for slider and then sliders with an S. So it's really funny. They were able to rank for the menu item, no problem. They were able to rank for the Wagyu slider, no problem, because those signals were on their menu and the menu highlight. But when it came to a broader search query for slider, they weren't really ranking that well. They were ranking below. So it's probably because it's a way more competitive keyword to rank for, and there has to be other signals. And what I did notice is there was, in photos, Google will categorize your photos. So if you go into Google Maps and you look under photos, you'll see categories. They did have a category called slider. It didn't have an S in it. So they were ranking better for just slider, but when it came to sliders with an S, they couldn't rank for it. So it's interesting to see that just the S and making it plural in slider. So it's very specific. The search queries are really specific.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, we get that question a lot, is like, do I add an S or not on the SEO side of things? But now having the proof on maps is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I really liked that example. I thought it was like super interesting and just really drives home the point of search query and like the signals on your Google business profile. Like those specific keywords have to be exact in order, because you're competing for all these keywords. And you always have to look at your competitors and your categories, and we'll get into that a bit more here. So, and this is just, again, this is just showing you your menu highlights. So if you wanted to change the name, you could go into your menu highlights. You could also do it in your NMX, and you could try to adjust it so that you can rank for the relative keyword that you're trying to rank for. And then over here, we mentioned high quality photos. So you want to make sure that you have high quality photos, because Google will use your photos, not just your customer photos, within the menu highlights. So if you're really looking to engage, having good quality photos, good lighting is going to help you engage better with your audience. So keep that in mind. And I do notice that when a new listing is created and I upload the high quality photos that we have for that specific brand, they immediately go into menu highlights. So before the business is even open, before they even have any reviews, Google pushes it into the menu highlights section. So even if you don't have a menu, you still have a menu highlights section, and it's all driven from your photos. So it's extremely important to make sure that you have high quality photos.
Very interesting. And I think you have some actionable tips in a little bit in the future slide. So we'll get talking about more about photos. I have some opinions there. But now I'm very curious to hear about categories, because this is something that I had some issues recently with one of the nail salons, and we kept testing that back and forth, and we saw similar things that you're about to talk about. But can you tell us a little bit more about how are categories impacting rankings, and what did you find there?
So I really like this example because this is an Italian restaurant. It's not really a pizza restaurant, but I wanted, this ranking report is specifically for pizza near me and best pizza near me. And so they rank pretty good. They only have 4 pizza menu items on their menu within their Google business profile. So I thought it was interesting that they can rank, in the top 4 for pizza near me. But then I was like, let me see what happens if I remove, by the way, I added the category pizza to this restaurant. So before I added pizza, they weren't ranking. I added pizza, they started ranking really well. And then I decided that I was going to remove just to verify my data. And as soon as I removed the secondary category of pizza, they couldn't rank. So there's specific search query terms that you need to make sure that you have that category. So another example would be like steak. If you don't have steakhouse as a category, you're not going to rank that well for that keyword. Same thing with any like seafood items. You want to make sure that you have it labeled as a seafood restaurant. Same thing with sushi. So you're always, if you have specific menu items, let's say you're not specifically a sushi restaurant, you might be a Chinese restaurant that offers sushi menu items. You need to make sure that you have that in your secondary category, or you're going to really struggle to rank for those specific keywords.
Interesting. Now, if we're talking about a restaurant that can potentially have, there's some restaurants out there that have an entire book of a menu where they offer every single type of cuisine. That's going to be a little bit more challenging, right? But in this case, is basically saying at least focus, right? Focus your efforts on whatever is more popular, whatever you want to drive more customers to, and use those as categories, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a big ranking factor within Google. And it's funny, it's sometimes I'll notice if I remove a category, I struggle to start ranking right away, even though if I put it right back and the signals are there, there's still those review mentions or those photos are there, but it takes time to build that ranking back up. So it almost feels like Google forgets that you're a pizza restaurant. And then until the signals start to come back through the reviews and then a new photo, that's when it starts to rank again. So if you notice a drop and it's not coming back immediately, you got to make sure that you're adding some photos and maybe a review mention with the keyword, and you'll notice that it'll start ranking again.
Very interesting.
And I do want to point out, like, this was a secondary category and they're ranking this well for pizza. And I do want to say that I truly believe that because it's a busy restaurant and they have a very high engagement, that's why they're able to rank for these specific keywords. So if you tend to have a high engagement and a lot of good click-through ratio, you can really rank well for a lot of keywords that you wouldn't think you'd be able to rank for. Like, because you think it's pizza, they should be prioritizing other pizza shops. And they do during certain hours of the day. So again, openness is also something to consider. So I think I mentioned that in this slide here. When I ran reports during lunchtime, they didn't have as high of rankings. So keep that in mind when you're testing your data. You want to make sure that you're testing different times of day, and then, thinking about, is this a primary category or a secondary category? Because I do believe if it's not your primary category, you might have a hard time getting in the top 3. So if you really are focused on ranking for one specific keyword, then you need to make sure that's your primary category and not a secondary.
Yeah, I have a funny story. So I was at the nail salon, right? And it was, I think the nail salon opens at 9:30 a.m. And I was there. I was taking care of the cashier because I work there on the weekends, taking care of the front. So this was 9:27 a.m. Go on Google, and I searched for nail salon near me. We were not there, right? Nowhere to be found. I search again on purpose, 9:31. So 1 minute after we're supposed to open, I search again, number 1 everywhere. And it was just hilarious. I took screenshots of this because it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Like, I'll search certain things at different times of day, and it's like Google's showing a completely different category too. So they might, like, if you're searching, like, just for example, like a liquor item, if you have, I noticed, like, you can rank for liquor if it's on your menu because it's all integrated. But if you're searching at a certain time of day, they're showing you liquor stores. But if you're searching during like dinner time, you're more likely to see the restaurants ranking for that particular liquor name than versus like 10 o'clock at night. They think you're looking for a liquor store.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And that's when we start talking about keywords, right? Like what is people searching for? That search intent sounds like Google's trying to think ahead of like what exactly do we need. When it comes to your research or keyword research, how do you go for that? Like what kind of process do you have for keyword research?
So a lot of my research, I'm trying to look at the signals that are already on the Google business profile and then drive home like, okay, this is a ranking factor and this is, but when I'm really interested in getting a client to rank for certain keywords, a lot of the ranking reports that I use pull in from the Google ads, the volume on the ranking keyword. So that's one of the things that I'm definitely looking at. And when I'm deciding on whether I should make one primary category versus another, I do look at search volume. So if there's like a ton of search volume for pizza restaurant versus Italian restaurant or sushi versus Chinese restaurant, I'll talk to the client about it and ask them, like, do you want to be primarily known as this? I think we can get a lot more impressions because the search volume is a lot higher if we choose this primary category over this one. So, I mean, there are a lot of things to consider, and you really got to kind of see what your goals are within your local ranking and then kind of go from there. And then if you also have a ton of competitors in your area, you may want to consider just opting for a different keyword primary category to help maybe rank, and be shown more visibility because you chose that route.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get a little bit more practical and talk about effective review and photo strategies, because I think you have really good insights on this based on your research, right? So let's dive a little bit deeper into what are your findings here? What are you seeing? And how does this all combine together, right?
Yeah, so reviews help really engage on your Google business profile. So people are leaving tons of data when they're leaving you a review because Google's asking them all kinds of questions. They're asking them if they had lunch or dinner. They're asking how much they spent. They're asking how the ambiance was. And then they're asking for photos. So if you can get a consumer to add all that data to your Google business profile, it's going to help you in the long run. So putting a review strategy in place is crucial for any restaurant and any business. You need the reviews. You'll notice I have ranking reports that I show, like as soon as that keyword is in a review, there's a boost. That next day, you'll see a boost. So if I see a boost in a ranking, I will go and look at the reviews just to see if that keyword was there the day before or around that same time frame. And then I can say, oh, okay, that's why I have this boost because it was mentioned in the review. And then photos in general, I mean, Google is looking at photos and really, photos are for sure a ranking factor. It's almost undeniable at this point. And then recently I just tweeted out how restaurants specifically have categories for their photos. And then if you actually start to browse through photos in a restaurant, they link them up now to a menu item, and then they also link up to reviews. So Google's like connecting the dots for the consumer, making it really easy to engage on your Google business profile. So again, like the more photos you can add to your Google business profile, the better. And then I added in service because we don't have to just talk about restaurants here. Like your menu item is the same thing as your service area on your Google business profile. So make sure that you are really utilizing that area within your Google business profile and listing all your services. And I'm going to give you an extra tip later on with services that's really going to be a great ranking factor. And then of course, menu. If you don't have it listed in your menu item, you have a review, you have your photos, you still might not rank. So they're definitely looking to see that you have multiple signals. It's not just one signal. You have to make sure that you have multiple signals. So this one right here, I just was looking at steak. I mean, steak is extremely competitive search query.
Right.
the green line is showing the menu highlight, which was hanger steak. So, I mean, they had a menu highlight, and just so you know, I did not have steakhouse listed for this restaurant because they're not really a steakhouse, but they have steak on their menu. So it's just relative to your menu items. Don't think of your category as like, well, I'm not a steakhouse, so I don't want to be listed as a steakhouse. Google gives you the option to add a primary category and 9 additional categories. So utilize it. Look at your menu items, look at all the restaurant categories, and pick the most useful one. And if you have a ton of great desserts, don't forget to add dessert restaurant as a category. It could go a long way for you. So yeah, this one is just showing when I added steak, and then you'll see in the red when it peaks. That's literally the exact time that a customer left a review mentioning steak and added a photo, and then instant boost. So I just want to point out, like, you see this flat line? It's because Steakhouse was added in like mid-June, but then there was no signal after that. There was no review mentioned, there was no photo until this first peak here, and that's when they started to rank. So it wasn't like right away I added steakhouse as a category and then Google saw that there were previous steak photos. It happens afterwards. So that's also something to keep in mind.
But this changes in rankings, or the impact is coming fairly quickly, right? After you're doing these changes.
It really depends on the search query. So like steak is extremely broad, and it's not like I had a menu highlight that just was labeled steak. If you do, that's great. You know, your chances of ranking for steak are going to be a lot higher than your competitor who has like a ribeye steak, because they have the word ribeye in there. So search query, like the specific naming, is like really significant for your rankings.
So talking about encouraging customer reviews, what can you tell us about this?
Believe in like automating your customer reviews. You have to make sure that you have something organic in place. So tying into your reservation system is going to be key, or your POS system, and making sure that you are targeting your customers as soon as they leave the next day, or as soon as they leave the restaurant. If you have takeout as an option, you can easily tap into an integration with your takeout systems, and then make sure you're automating a review campaign. And people love leaving reviews for restaurants. I mean, it's a lot harder for other categories, service-based categories. Restaurants, it's extremely easy. So just asking for the review, you're likely to get at least a 4% conversion rate on reviews. And that's pretty typical. It's going to be anywhere from 2 to 4%. But in the grand scheme of things, 2 to 4% seems extremely low, but you'll notice that 60% of your reviews are coming because you're actually requesting reviews from your audience. So it's definitely worth putting in a review automation. And then you can personalize it. You can have a targeted message. You can make sure that you're asking them to name their favorite dish. So that might go a long way too.
Yeah, especially because for some reason, people just don't immediately think about it, right? But when you trigger that, whether it's an automation or somebody asking or whatever that may be, it's just like, oh yeah, I can leave a 5 stars. I had a great time. Now, when we switch gears into talking about high quality photos, and this goes along for every category, right? Because if it's a hotel, right, your services should have great photos. But if it's food, right, definitely, because you don't want to, I mean, I like to say that we eat with our eyes first, right? Like, we're going to look at that first before we even try it. So what are some of the actionable tips that you can give us on photos?
So don't ever forget click-through ratio. It's extremely important. If you have a lot of clicks and a lot of engagements, you're going to rank a lot better. So in order to get your click-through ratio better, you definitely need to have high quality photos on your Google business profile. So you don't want to rely on the reviews, because a lot of restaurants, they have really low lighting. They tend to, it tends to be dark. So you'll notice like photos that customers are putting on your Google business profile are going to be a little bit darker. So if you can invest in some high quality photos, and it doesn't have to be like every week or every month where you're having these photo shoots. No, you could do it 1 to 2 times a year. You can take, multiple photos, save them in a folder, and then kind of schedule them out every month or every week on your Google business profile. But make sure that you have really high quality photos so that your customers will engage and actually start scrolling through your Google business profile.
And that's a great tip too. Just thinking ahead, saying like, maybe it's seasonal, right? Maybe it's like once a year, twice a year. Just having that schedule is going to help a lot. And I know, because I've seen this, rankings improving, rankings really being impacted by photos. But I think this experiment that you did was a great way to represent the data, right? Represent the theory. So talk to us a little bit about what you saw on the rankings with these specific photos.
So, okay, this doesn't really relate to restaurants. This is more for a service-based company. I went to a med spa and I purchased this product that was like trending on TikTok, and it's been really popular. And I took a picture of it. And when I left a review, I added a picture of the product to my review. And I wanted to see if I could get this keyword or to rank through the photo, because I know how significant photos are. This is actually my client too. So after a while, I noticed that they were not ranking because of the photo. So I added it in the services section. So it's just the product name. So it's not a service, it's a product name. It's the actual product name. After I did that, boom, I just started to rank. So like if you see here, there's the flat line, never ranked. It's, ranking at 100. And then all of a sudden, Google recognizes that it's a service and a photo. And now I'm ranking for an actual product just by, and I didn't mention the keyword in my review. So it's just a photo and the item was mentioned in the service. So you'll see here, like this is where it peaks when I first added in services, because we know that services is a ranking factor. And then when you added in the combination of the photo, that's when it really stabilizes and you can continue to rank for that specific product. So I thought this was extremely cool, and I tested it again with 3 more products. I added 3 more product lines that the med spa carries, and I made sure to first just added the service because I just wanted to see if I was going to get the boost immediately. I wasn't seeing any activity, so I decided to add the photos. And then when I added the photos, now they're all ranking number 1 for that keyword. So it's really interesting to see. But keep in mind, openness is plays a role. So if you're looking like at a certain time in the evening, they'll tend to show you like drugstores and like certain like CVS pharmacy. And I was noticing like those were getting ranked, but during the med spa open hours, when I looked for this specific brand name, then I was able to see that I was ranking number 1 for it.
And these are, again, additional keywords that you're bringing into the content, right? So it's a great tactic to just add more content, add more really, optimization.
It's the same concept of like your landing page optimization.
Yeah.
So adding keywords onto your website. Now Google wants you to add those keywords on your Google business profile. And so find with whatever your category is, whether you have the ability to add services, whether you have the ability to add a menu, whatever integration, whether you have the ability to sync with the product catalog, huge ranking factors there. So if you have any of those abilities, you have to utilize them.
Yeah, so let's talk about more practical tips, right? For people that are listening to us, they want to hop off, don't hop off now, but hop off after the webinar, and they want to go take action. I really like this menu highlights. I think it looks really cool, right? It's giving that more social aspect. So can you tell us a little bit more about what did you see? What have you seen on this feature, right? And how can people maximize the use of it?
Yeah, menu highlights, the actual name that appears here on the menu highlight is important. It's going to help you rank. So if you want to rank for hamburger, then, and you could get a menu highlight that has just hamburger, that's huge. And then you also want to make sure that you have like your other layers in place. You have the photos, you have your categories, everything else has to be in place. A lot of times, if you notice your menu highlights are blank, it's because you might not have your menu integrated. And so Google's not really sure. So, because they're looking at the keywords and reviews, and I believe they're looking at your menu to try to name some of these photos and then put them in your menu highlights. So all these photos here were actually uploaded by myself and when I created the listing. So you got to make sure, this is before it was even open. So you'll notice that it'll label them for you, and you want to make sure, like you'll see here, this says smoothie bowl. Those are shakes. It's not a smoothie bowl. So Google gets it wrong. Pay attention. Make sure you're suggesting edits. Make sure you have a lot of layers in place so that Google can see what it is that you have in stock.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. It's an easy, honest mistake, right? Smoothie versus different type. This is where it gets very interesting, because I do think the quality of photos, the lighting, the way the food looks, right, especially when it's being featured. What can you tell us? Like, what are some pro tips here to capture attention?
Yeah, so you'll see like you have zero lighting on the photo. You might not get as much engagement, but when you have high quality, high lit photos, you're definitely going to get somebody to kind of click through. Like if you have a juicy hamburger and somebody's looking, oh, let me look, or even just a beautiful picture of your restaurant just to kind of display the ambiance, you're going to get somebody to more likely, oh, this looks like a nice restaurant. Let me look at it. So, and then just getting that click is going to really help you just rank better, because the more clicks, the more engagements, the more popular you become to Google, and then they're going to rank you better.
Now, we're obviously continue talking about these practical items. I don't think these are set and forget. Like, you don't do it just once. So what is your suggestion on that? Like, how often, or is it really, like, would you recommend is just do it once and then never do it again, never touch it again?
It just depends on, I definitely think that somebody within the organization needs to be monitoring it and looking at and it doesn't take a long time, right? So somebody who knows, who's more intimate, like a manager or even like any of the staff that really knows the menu items, knows the specials, they need to make sure that they're looking at the menu highlights at least once a month. That's what I suggest to my clients. And then if they notice something, they could bring it to my attention, or they can suggest the edit themselves. If they're having a hard time getting Google to change it, that's when I tell them, okay, get me involved. And then we can look at the other signals to see why Google is labeling something that way. But you definitely want to monitor these menu items and the names. And then another thing that I forgot to mention that's actually really important when you're naming your menu items, a lot of restaurants, because they're looking at the menu's set internally. So they have a category or a header internally. So say like it's pizza. Well, then they just label pepperoni, vegetarian. Google is not looking at that header. They are looking at the actual menu item. So I've tested this before. So you need to make sure that you're labeling it pepperoni pizza and not just pepperoni or vegetarian. So if you have a hamburger, you have to label it hamburger at the end, or steak or filet. So if you just have a specific name, but you think like, oh, everyone knows what it is because it's under the header, meats or dinners or specials. No, make sure that you actually repeat it in the actual menu item name. And prime example is sushi. A lot of people have the category sushi, and then they name every single item roll. You need to make sure that it's an avocado sushi roll and not just avocado roll.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it on the podcast when we were saying, like, yes, it's cool to get creative with names, but keywords are important. Like, keywords need to be there.
Definitely. Keywords need to be there. You want to make sure that all the layers, every layer needs to be looked at and then just reevaluated. And then you'll be able to like quickly identify, like, if I'm not ranking for something, what did I miss here? Let's go through all the layers again one more time. So that just brings us to like Google's ecosystem, right? So they're just They're focused on the users and the user's intent, and whatever signals you can drive home on your Google Business Profile, that's going to really help you rank for what you need to rank for. So again, anytime you can put in an integration, a third-party integration, make sure to do it, because Google wants the user to stay in their ecosystem. And so by integrating into that ecosystem, you're ensuring that the user is staying there, and that's going to help with your engagement, your click-through ratio, and then boom, you'll start to rank a lot better.
So you're obviously sharing a lot of great insights, a lot of actionable, right, like practical tips that they can go tackle. Why don't we summarize that high level, what we talked about today, and just, very, very actionable for our listeners.
So I'm just going to repeat all the main ranking factors for everybody, for the audience here. Each search query is a little bit different. So I believe that with specific search queries, some of these ranking factors play a higher priority. But you definitely want to look at your categories. Secondary categories are very important. Primary is going to help you rank within the top 3. But still, secondary categories extremely relevant. And then business name. If you can't rank for Slider, and your competitor has a brand in the area with the name Slider in there, and that's in their business name, and you see them just ranking in the top 20 and they're like scattered throughout, it's because they have it in the business name. And so you have to take that into consideration. And then you want to look at menu items. That's another ranking factor. Make sure that the keyword is in your menu, not just in the header, but in the actual menu item. Then you want to look at photos. Do I have photos of the food item that I want to rank for? Do I have enough photos? Do I have photos of the services that I'm trying to rank for? Then you want to look at your menu highlights, and keywords in reviews definitely plays a role. You'll definitely see a boost and a spike in your keywords and reviews. You want to take into consideration openness. So time of day of the search query does matter. Google will prioritize different categories at different times of day. Then there's the popular times boost. If you actually happen to be extremely busy at a specific time, you may find yourself getting a little boost in your ranking. Click-through ratio, proximity, and attributes. So those are my 8 ranking factors for your Google Business Profile.
That's awesome. Very actionable, very simple, simple in theory, right? But a lot of work behind it, but it's worth it. So I have a success story that I wanted to share, because I know this is one of Uberall's client, Pizza Bill, and I know they're doing a great job managing their entire listings ecosystem, right? They're following a lot of the things that you're talking about. I know they're doing great photos. They're doing a lot of things, really cool things with the platform. And the numbers show, right? So this is why they've been a success story for quite some time. But it's just the results, right? It's like, is it worth the effort on hiring a photographer or managing your listing or really taking it up a notch? Short answer is yes, right? It's like we have so many examples, so many, not just this case study, but like all the research and the report that you put together to prove that. Now, next step here, right? Like how can somebody really grab the content from today and just, where do they start, right? It's like, what is the first next step after this webinar?
I think doing some keyword research would be a really good start. Look at some of the keywords that you're looking to rank for, and then go into your Google Business Profile and identify all the signals around that one specific keyword. So there's going to be different signals for every single search query. So focus on that, and then kind of go through my list of 8 ranking factors and take those all into consideration when you're running your ranking report, and then see how you progress. And if you notice that you're missing some signals, go out, get some photos, then look at your ranking reports in a few days to see if that you can get that boost just by adding that photo. And then, of course, keywords and reviews will get you that little boost that you need as well.
Yeah, and as another actionable item, I mean, we do have an exclusive free personalized audit, right? So there's a pop-up on your screen right now showing, if you're curious to find out what are some of those opportunities, where do you start, great way to sign up, get that audit, and then take it from there. So I think, Claudia, we have a few questions that came in as we were talking. I actually forgot to mention at the beginning that we were going to get to this, but we are going to respond to a few. So I have some for you that I wanted to bring up. I'm looking here. So this one right here, aside from Google, which directories or search engines should restaurant operators optimize for?
Definitely Yelp and any reservation system that is customer facing. So Open Table is a great example. You want to make sure that you're optimized on Yelp and Open Table for sure, and generating reviews there. Google pulls that into the knowledge panel as well now. So definitely citations that Google's looking at as well.
What are the best practices for responding to reviews, especially ones from unhappy customers, right? So those are tricky.
Yeah, they get tricky. A lot of times, sometimes I'll just keep it vague. If there's a certain ambiance of a place that customers don't like, but you necessarily can't do anything about it. Just thank them for their feedback and let them know that you're looking into it. And then kind of just, if you need to take something offline, request them to reach out to you directly. But at the end of the day, just make sure that you respond, that you're polite, and definitely don't be too defensive.
Yeah, I like that. I really like the fact that when a company responds, right, the way it doesn't matter as much of what are they saying, is the matter that they care, they responded. A lot of the times that negative review is not going to stop me to go there, right? Like I already want to go. I just, maybe this was a bad day for that person. I don't know the whole context, right? But the business care, they responded is like, I mean, I'm still going to go, right? It's not going to stop me. So think about it from that perspective as well.
Right.
So how should a restaurant prioritize which menu items to push for customer reviews? And what's the best approach for gathering reviews that directly mention these items, I guess, to boost rankings, right? So we're going back to that. Like, do you have any actionable tips, or how can they drive those reviews that are going to have keywords in them?
Yeah, so keep in mind that, every search query has different rankings. So do your research and look to see if, like Caesar salad is not a high volume keyword. I just used that as an example because I knew there was tons of reviews and I wanted to have the data and to drive home some of my ranking factors. So if you want to make sure you're doing your keyword research and find out what keywords are really relevant. And then from there, you're going to prioritize based on your restaurant's menu priorities, right? So if you are a steakhouse, you have to push steak. That's going to be a big priority for you. So keep that in mind. Every restaurant's a little bit different. If you want to push catering, then you want to make sure that you have your catering menu on there, and then you have like your menu should detail like large size portions, and then maybe have photos of that catering item. So there's definitely ways to get creative. You have to specify what you're really looking to rank for first.
Right. Yep. So we've got a few more questions, but we're running out of time. So I'm just going to ask one last one here because I think this is pretty interesting. How can a restaurant or restaurant brands measure ROI on their local marketing efforts? Because that's tricky, right? So how do you what have you done in the past on this?
So attribution is so hard to measure, especially for a restaurant that tends to be seasonal. So summertime or wintertime, pizza deliveries are up. Click-through ratio changes. People are ordering more carryout during certain times of the year. Attribution is really difficult. But at the end of the day, if you are doing your research and you have your ranking reports and you're seeing that you're ranking, I think the biggest thing to look at is you're on your Google business profile. Look at your engagements. Google tells you like how many times people clicked and looked at your menu, how many calls you're getting, how many clicks on your website. So if you see an increase there, then you know that you're doing all the right things to drive more traffic. And then at the end of the day, is the revenue up? And that's, going to be on your customer's end or on your end to decide like, yes, we are maintaining, we're increasing in revenue, or we're not.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that, right? So,
Yeah.
Claudia, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge today, all the information from your research and your ongoing experimentations. If people want to reach out, they want to stay connected with you, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just search Claudia Tamina, and you can also find me on Twitter and check out my blogs. I'm constantly talking about, all my case studies on the blog. So you could definitely look there on Reputation Arm.
Awesome. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. If you want to learn more, hear more about Claudia's perspective and opinion, we did that podcast recording as well recently, so you can head over to YouTube and Spotify and listen to that. But with that, thank you so much for tuning in. Great having you here, and we'll see you on the next one.